Welcome to Buying Tech, the key specs. This presentation will help you to buy a laptop or computer. Let's begin. So, what's the difference in hardware? Perhaps you want to pause the presentation at this point, have a little think. That's correct. The big difference is form factor. All of these computers have roughly the same technology inside them, but it's how convenient, how portable it is. Now, to give you a really good feel for how a computer looks, this is a MacBook Pro with an M1 processor. And if you look carefully, you can see the vast majority of this is actually battery. The parts that are doing all the work are actually on the motherboard, and the motherboard is actually pretty small. Let's have a look at that to scale. As you can see, it's only a small part of the computer, but that's the part doing most of the work. The rest of the laptop is to really provide that battery life. Let's have a look in a bit of detail because I think this gives you an idea of the scale and how things are working. So the CPU is the engine of the computer. That's the part that's doing all the calculations, doing all the logic. Then we have the RAM. Notice how close it is to the CPU. That does improve performance, but because it's soldered on, that means it can't be upgraded. Whatever you buy, you are stuck with. And then we have the SSD. Again, it's quite fast for SSD, but again, it's soldered, so you can't increase capacity once it's been bought. So the closer something is to the CPU, the faster it will be to get at the memory. This board is a lot like a highway. So let's take that a bit further. Now, KLCC stands for KL City Center. Let's assume that's where the actual CPU is. And then Sunway Lagoon is where the RAM is. Between those two places, there's very good highways. It's quite quick to get back and forth. And that is really important to you. Now, the SSD is all the way on the Sepang Gold Coast. It's going to take a while to get there, and every time you need to fetch something from that, it is going to take you a while. Another way to think about this is your brain is the CPU. Your memory is the RAM, and your book is the SSD. So if you fetch something from your brain, it's very quick to process. If you retrieve something from your memory in your head, that's quite quick. But if you have to go and read something from a book or look it up within the book, that is going to take you a while. Which is why the other day when I looked on Lazada, 139 ringgit buys you 8 gigabytes of RAM or 256 gigabytes SSD. Be very careful when you go into a shop because they will often quote you the bigger number because it sounds more attractive. And technically, yes, it's memory, but it's secondary memory. When you're talking about memory, you want to be thinking about the RAM. So look at your sizes very carefully. I would be very surprised if you had 128 gigs of RAM. Perhaps in a large desktop it's possible, but I think it's unlikely. So RAM and SSD. RAM is measured in gigabytes. SSD is measured in gigabytes most of the time, but sometimes it's measured in terabytes, and that is approximately 1024 gigabytes. Some Windows laptops and desktops can be upgraded after purchase, so that gives you a bit more flexibility. So how much RAM do you need? 8 gigs is enough for basic browsing and productivity software, and 4 gigs is okay for a phone or tablet. However, if you're doing video editing, I would highly recommend 16 gigs. And 16 gigs is the minimum you want for gaming. Remember, if you run out of RAM, your computer is going to slow right down because it's got to go all the way to the SSD. How much SSD? Well, 64 gigs is okay for your basic phone. 128 gigs is okay for a tablet or phone, and you'll get by. You'll have to do some management, but it's okay. 256 gigs is just enough for a laptop. I am forever taking off apps, deleting things, moving things to the external hard drive. It's just enough. 512 gigs is comfortable for a non-gaming laptop, and if you're talking about gaming, at least a terabyte. Don't forget, hard disks are still around, but mostly now used as additional drives. So your desktop might come with a hard disk drive, like a 4 terabyte hard disk drive, as extra storage. And don't forget, you can always buy external hard drives, and I do that to put aside my videos that I've edited, my working files, things like that, to help manage that space. Choose your religion. I'm pretty agnostic. I have Linux devices, I have macOS devices, and I have Windows devices in the house. And most people will have decided. Now, at the risk of offending the religious, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice. If you're not sure, macOS is what the teachers use in our school. If you're coming across this and thinking about other schools, then please check. But there are two key premium apps, Final Cut Pro for video editing and Logic Pro for sound editing. These are very premium and really do enjoy a great experience. They're not required for schoolwork, but if you're really into video editing, it might be the option for you. On Windows, there is a premium suite by Adobe called Adobe Premium, and that is a fantastic suite. Now, Windows machines are generally cheaper, best for gaming. They're needed for IGCSE ICT, and they're needed for some 3D work. They also support stylus and touchscreens. Linux is more specialist for the hobbyist and for those who like to tinker with their operating system. For CPUs, Mac, at the moment, it's basically choose the M1 chip. Just be careful, if you've used Mac for a long time, there might be some software that isn't compatible. CPUs, Windows laptops, this is more complex. I would recommend making sure it's at least 10th gen. If you want high quality performance, an i7 or Ryzen 7 will be very good for video editing. The Core i9 and Ryzen 9 are the best of the best. But if you are concerned about performance, I would recommend looking at Tom's Hardware before making a purchase. And top performing desktop machines are about balance. They're about the GPU, the CPU, but also other factors can be limiting. Cooling, RAM, SSD, and hard disk drive all play a part. A really good guide is available at gamingcpus.net. Look, I'm going to be honest with you, in 6 months' time, things are always cheaper, faster, better. October is actually a pretty good time to buy because you'll know what's out and you'll know what's likely to be coming. However, the minute November hits, the Christmas market happens and there's normally a jump in pricing. Same for December, bad times to buy. Even though you may not be in a country that celebrates Christmas in a big way, this is a global marketplace and Christmas has a big effect. January's an interesting one. In some places celebrating Chinese New Year, you may not get the discounts, but often there can be some bargain older models. February, generally not a great month to buy, and March, again, you're going to know what's new for next year, so that's often the best time to buy. And between April and August is also generally a good time to buy because you know what's coming out and there are no particular price rises coming out then. Gaming laptops in Malaysia. Look, a lot of gaming laptops are too heavy for school. They easily overheat, especially if they're overclocked. And one of the features is overclocking, so be very careful. And often they're expensive compared to the desktop equivalent. So do consider a cheaper laptop for school and a desktop for home. Other important considerations. Battery life. Manufacturers are always very optimistic. A 12-hour claimed battery life is often 8 or 6 hours in real life, and if it's a gaming laptop, that can be reduced to 1 hour just by using the GPU. So take those with a pinch of salt. 2-in-1. Many Windows laptops have touchscreens and stylus, which means you've got a 2-in-1 device. Keyboard and trackpad quality. I still think the MacBook has a fantastic trackpad. Please check in the store if you can. And can it support a second monitor, and how do you connect it? make sure you check it with that second monitor, because right now that's a really important feature, especially with Zoom and video editing and other things. And ports, what can it actually connect to? Do you have to buy a USB hub? Finally, weight and size are important. Which brands do well? Well, I'm going to give you the top 5, but ultimately some form factors are tougher than others, but majority of laptops share similar parts, similar problems. That Dell rugged laptop, note it is 3.45 kilograms, so it's heavy, and that's what helps to make it durable. Reputable companies will offer cheaper extended warranties, and most warranties are local, so be careful if you're buying for university. If you need an international warranty, be sure to get it carefully. Overheating is a big issue in Malaysia, particularly if you are not using it in a well-ventilated area, especially with COVID, with everybody trying to get airflow up from outside. And most brands do share a lot of the same parts. Repairs. Well, recently I needed a MacBook repairing. It took over 3 weeks for what was actually a software issue. So please think about the warranties and if that's going to provide you with swapping or if it's going to provide you with an on-site warranty. A cheap Windows machine was repaired in less than a day. Parts were available locally. The top 5, one is Lenovo, HP, Dell, Apple, Asus. I'm not going to make any judgments. I've had to repair all of these devices and they're all roughly the same in terms of reliability. There is no brand of PC that I have used that hasn't had some problems at some point. But I leave you to make your own judgments. Now, how can you check for heat in shop? Firstly, I would stress in a shop, they are going to aircon things to the max because they are aware of overheating. So run it with the most powerful thing you can do. Try and get the most exciting 3D looking game you can, run YouTube at 4K and try and test it for at least 15 minutes to see if it starts to heat up. Computer shops are deliberately well aircon, so take that into account. I would advise you, there may be a small price difference, but go to places that are official partners. Do not buy them from vendors that are kiosks that don't look like they have a large presence and not part of a major company. This is an exercise we do in Year 9. It's a lot of fun. If you want to have a go at it, you can, but have a think about their requirements. You can pause now if you want to. So these have been fairly well loaded. Elise knows a Mac inside out. She's going to want to buy a Mac, so buy her a Mac. Angie definitely wants a Windows machine. She wants a gaming machine, so I think that's important. But possibly consider if you a desktop machine and a laptop for taking to school. Todd, try and find the hardiest machine you can. Maybe that Dell isn't a bad idea for him. And finally, Gail, she probably wants a Windows machine and she wants something that she can actually draw on potentially. That taking the notes is the key thing. She wants to draw directly on the machine and this would make things easier. Finally, here is a checklist so that you can go in, make sure you know the key details. Thank you very much for listening today. It's much appreciated.